The house that listened at midnight, a name whispered only when the lamps were low and the night settled like a soft blanket across old American towns. And tonight, dear listener, I invite you to drift gently into this tale a bedtime story, a relaxing story, a guided sleep meditation woven through calm shadows and the faintest touch of something magical. I am Evelyn Blackwood, and this is Midnight Murmurs Radio, where quiet mysteries breathe just enough to keep your dreams warm. Before we step across the threshold of the house that once listened truly listened, let's begin by settling your body and easing your mind. Lay back wherever you are, allowing your spine to soften into whatever supports you. Let your shoulders melt downward, releasing the day. Take a slow breath in. Hold it gently and let it drift out in a long, calming sigh. Again, deeper this time. Inhaling peace, exhaling anything you no longer need. Let your eyelids become a little heavier. Imagine your thoughts dimming like streetlights at the end of a small town road, one by one growing softer, quieter, until only the gentlest glow remains. You are safe, you are warm, and the world outside can wait for another time. Here, in this quiet space, we walk together. Now, picture a long country road, the kind found in forgotten corners of New England, perhaps, or the rural stretches of Pennsylvania, where autumn comes early and stays late. The moon hangs low, not quite full, casting a pale silver sheen across rolling fields left untouched since the harvest festivals of an older America. There is a calmness here, a peace older than memory, wrapped in the faint scent of cedar and distant wood smoke. Along this road rests the house. Its porch leans slightly, like it has spent decades listening to stories carried on the wind. Its shutters do not rattle. Instead, they sway, as if nodding slowly to the passing of time. Many houses creak, many houses breathe, but this one listens. At midnight, especially when the world grows quiet enough, you can feel its attention soft, observant, almost compassionate, not haunted in the way of dread, but haunted in the way a diary is haunted by the emotions pressed gently between its pages. Tonight, we walk toward it together. The gravel path beneath your feet crunches softly, rhythmic and slow, matching the steady cadence of your breath. Around you, fireflies flicker like drifting memories. A distant owl hoots once, then falls silent. The air is cool, slightly damp, carrying echoes of old stories, whispers of immigrant families who built these lands, traces of native traditions honoring the spirits of night, remnants of autumn bonfire gatherings and small-town Halloween parades, long before modern lights dimmed the stars. As you step onto the porch, the wooden boards sigh beneath your weight, not a complaint, simply an acknowledgement. The house seems aware of your arrival, aware of the gentle curiosity you bring with you. It has heard footsteps like yours before, wanders, dreamers, restless souls seeking quiet after long days. And now, with a delicate exhale, you push the door open. It doesn't resist. It simply eases inward, welcoming you into its hush-filled darkness. Inside, the faint glow of moonlight spills through lace curtains, faded by decades. Dust floats like tiny comets in the pale light, drifting slowly in the stillness. The air is warm, warmer than it should be in a house left untouched for so long, as if something inside tends to the temperature, ensuring comfort for those who enter. You move deeper, breathing slowly, your body growing heavier, calmer. The living room holds antique furniture, a rocking chair made for slow stories, a piano missing a few keys, yet humming faintly with memory, and a tall grandfather clock frozen at, of course, 12 o'clock, midnight. And that is when you hear it. Not a voice, not a footstep, just attention. A soft, perceptible shift in the air, like the house adjusting itself to listen more closely, as though it has waited for someone who walks with gentleness, someone who arrives without fear, someone who acknowledges the quiet history of forgotten places. You stand still, letting the hush settle around you. Your heartbeat slows. Your breath deepens. The stillness wraps you like a quilt, stitched by tender hands. And then, just as your eyes grow heavier, you sense something subtle. A presence not threatening, not sorrowful, but watchful. A remnant of someone who lived here long ago, perhaps during the early 1900s, when this region hummed with factory towns, railway whistles, and the weight of unspoken stories. Whoever they were, they left something behind, and the house listened. It always listened. But tonight, it wants to be heard. And as your breath slows further, matching the deep rhythm of the old wooden walls, you realize this is not a haunted house meant to frighten. It is a haunted memory meant to soothe, to guide you deeper into calmness, deeper into sleep. And as chapter 1 continues, the house will begin revealing which memories it has kept safe for over a century. Asterisk. And so you stand within the house's hush, wrapped in its warm, watchful quiet, letting the soft pulse of midnight settle beneath your skin. The air feels thicker, now subtle, like warm steam rising from a cup of tea. And in that stillness, the house seems to breathe with you, its walls expanding and contracting in a slow, comforting rhythm. You take another peaceful step forward. Your fingers brush against the wallpaper, its texture gently peeling, patterned with faded vines and tiny clusters of blueberries, an old New England motif once popular in smaller farming towns. The pattern seems almost hand-painted, delicate and patient. Someone spent hours here, decades ago, crafting the walls with the kind of care lost to time. Your fingertip follows the curling shapes, and for a moment, beneath the quiet, you feel a faint vibration, like a whisper running beneath the surface. Not words, not a message, but memory. The house remembers everything. You wander into what must once have been the parlor. The moonlight stretches longer here, its glow spilling across a rug woven with colonial stars, frayed along the edges by years of footsteps, Thanksgiving gatherings, Halloween nights filled with laughter, quiet winter evenings, bicyclehitas, stories told during power outages. These memories linger in the air like music without sound. Then something catches your attention. Framed photograph sits upon a narrow table, slightly crooked, as if nudged by a gentle, invisible hand. You lift it carefully, keeping your breath slow and calm. Inside the frame is a family: father, mother, a young daughter, and a boy of about 10. Their clothing suggests the year was somewhere around 1918. During the final echoes of World War I, the father's eyes seem weary but kind, his shoulders broad beneath a wool coat. The mother's face glows with a softness that feels familiar, as though she could still be tending a pot of stew in the kitchen, humming an old folk song passed down through her own mother. And the children, their smiles, are small, reserved, but genuine, like they understand the weight of the times yet find comfort within these walls. On the back of the frame, a name is etched faintly: the Merriman family. You whisper the name silently in your mind, letting it settle gently within the stillness, and as the thought passes, the house shifts. Again, not ominously, but like a quiet acknowledgement, as though the name means something here, something still alive within these wooden bones. A soft creak comes from upstairs, not sharp, not startling, just slow, deliberate, like a footstep made by someone who doesn't want to disturb a sleeping child. You lift your gaze toward the staircase, its carved banister gleaming faintly under slivers of moonlight. The air grows warmer again, drifting down like breath from an unseen presence. But you are calm. The house encourages calm. You step toward the stairs, the rug muffling each movement, and as you place your hand on the banister, you feel it again, the faint vibration, the whisper of memory. The wood is polished smooth by generations of hands. You climb slowly, each step a gentle invitation deeper into the house's story. Halfway up, you pause. A soft rhythmic tapping echoes distantly steady, repeating, almost musical. It reminds you of something old, something used to mark time before digital clocks and electric chimes. Then you realize it is the grandfather clock downstairs, the one frozen at midnight, ticking slowly, patiently, but it should not be ticking. Still, the sound is soothing, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant dot. When you reach the second floor, you find the hallway bathed in soft, bluish light. The wallpaper here is different clusters of hand-drawn crescent moons and tiny lanterns, as though the family once celebrated lantern festivals inspired by harvest traditions. Perhaps they hosted small gatherings during autumn, lighting candles against the early night, telling local folklore about wandering spirits who guided lost travelers home. Folklore in America often blended with stories brought by immigrants, stitched together with local beliefs, forming quiet traditions passed through generations. At the end of the hallway is a partially open door. You walk toward it. The boards beneath your feet warm, not cold, as though someone walked this path moments before you. The tapping of the clock grows softer, now blending with the whisper of your breath. Inside the room, you find an old study. A writing desk sits beneath the window, papers scattered as though left in haste, an inkwell long dried, a fountain pen tipped sideways. The chair is pulled back, its cushion slightly indented. You walk closer, letting your fingertips hover above the papers, careful not to disturb their fragile state. Then, across the room. You notice a journal. Its leather cover is cracked, the spine worn, but it remains closed, tied with a thin piece of twine that looks newer than everything else in the room, as though something has preserved it carefully. The house seems to lean in, waiting. Not pushing you, not urging you, just listening, the way it always has, the way it did for the Merriman family, the way it will for anyone who enters with a quiet heart. You reach for the journal slowly, gently, letting your breath guide you. And the moment your fingertips touch the leather cover, a warm current moves up your arm, soft.com, like an old friend finally able to speak after years of silence. The house remembers. And soon, very soon, it will begin to reveal why. Asterisk. The journal rests beneath your fingertips, warm as if held moments ago, though the air around you remains still and untouched by any living hand. The soft blue light drifting through the window bathes the leather cover in a gentle glow, turning its cracked surface into something almost luminous. You breathe slowly, letting the warmth seep into your palm, and for a long moment, neither you nor the house moves. It feels as though the walls wait with you, patient and attentive, as though all the stories held inside them are leaning quietly toward this one object. With calm, deliberate movement, you slide the twine loose. It comes undone without resistance, falling softly like a strand of hair letting go after years of tension. When you lift the cover, a faint scent risoled, ink, cedar, wood, and the lingering touch of lavender oil, the kind used by families long ago to keep moths away from linens. The scent is comforting, familiar in a way you can't quite place, as if the memory belongs not to you, but to the house itself. The first page reveals handwriting, neat, looping, cursive, the kind taught in small-town schoolhouses during the early 1900s. Each letter feels intentional, pressed into the page with care. You read silently, your breath slow, matching the rhythm of the strokes. October 29th, 1918. Midnight again. The house is listening more closely tonight. You pause. The date is near Halloween, during a time when American towns held lantern walks for children, when neighbors placed candles inside hollowed turnips or early pumpkins to guide spirits and loved ones home. And 1918, a year wrapped in hardship, the end of war, the weight of influenza drifting across the country like an unseen fog. You continue reading. Mother says the house has always paid attention, especially when the nights grow longer. She says some houses keep their histories the way others keep their warmth. I used to think she was teasing, but now, when the wind quiets and the lanterns flicker, I hear the boards shift like someone leaning closer, listening. Waiting. The handwriting trembles slightly at the edges, not from fear, but from the earnestness of a child learning to understand the world. You turn the page, your fingertips sliding gently so as not to disturb the fragile paper. Father says we must leave soon. The sickness is spreading too quickly in town. But the house, it does not want us to go. Primera, K-N, fil italiano. The walls hum when we speak of leaving. The floorboards sigh, as if grieving. I wish I could tell it will return. I wish I believed we would. A soft breath escapes you. Not from fear, but from empathy. The air in the study grows warmer again, embracing you with that same protective tenderness you felt upon entering the house. It feels almost maternal, like a presence watching over both you and the boy who once wrote these lines. Your eyes drift toward the window. Outside, the moon has climbed slightly higher, painting the trees with silver strokes. The branches sway gently in a night breeze you cannot hear from inside, as though the world outside is fading, letting the story take precedence. You turn another page. The house knew before we did. I think it heard the worry in Father's voice, the way his boots dragged across the threshold tonight. Mother cried in the kitchen. She tried to be quiet, but the house heard that too. Sometimes I think the house feels our feelings louder than we do. A faint creak answers the words. Not from the hallway, not from the stairs. This one comes from directly behind you. Soft and steady. You do not turn around. You don't need to. The sound feels like reassurance, like a gentle nod. The house agreed. It remembers. You'll continue. If we leave, I hope someone kind will come to listen back to the house. I hope it won't be lonely. I hope it won't forget us. The ink grows lighter as the entry ends, as though the boy wrote until sleep began to claim him. When you lift your gaze from the page, the room feels fuller yet, still calm, still safe. The warm presence you sensed earlier now lingers close, like a quiet companion who has waited decades for these words to be read again. You close the journal gently, tying the twine back around the weathered leather. The moment you secure the knot, a soft breeze drifts through the room, though the windows remain shut. It carries the scent of cedar and old stories, wrapping around you like a shawl. Then a soft glow begins to shimmer near the far corner of the study. Not bright, not startling, just a faint, golden warmth blooming where the shadow is deepest. It flickers once, twice, like the wavering light of a lantern carried by unseen hands. And as it grows steadier, you understand. The house is no longer just listening. It is beginning to speak. Let your breath remain deep and slow as the night unfolds gently around you. The faint golden glow in the corner of the study flickers softly, as if steadying itself before revealing something long kept. In silence, it doesn't brighten in a sudden burst. Instead, it grows with the patience of a candle coaxed awake by gentle hands. You watch the light swell into shape, warm and velvety, as though stitched from threads of memory rather than flame. It casts no sharp shadows, only soft halos that ripple across the old wallpaper like breaths spreading through still air. Your body remains calm, your breathing slow and even, as if the house itself guides each inhale and exhale. The glow moves not outward, but upward, lifting slightly from the floor until it hovers at the height of a child's lantern. You don't see a figure holding it, yet the impression is unmistakable. Someone once stood in that exact corner, lantern in hand, waiting quietly for a parent or a sibling, or perhaps for the house to settle its creaking and sighing so the night would feel less lonely. The warmth of the light reaches you, brushing gently against your skin. It feels like a memory brushing the edge of your consciousness, kind, familiar, but just out of reach. You step closer. The floorboards beneath your feet offering a soft groan. Not a warning, only acknowledgement. As you draw near, the glow seems to lean toward you, curious in a shy, almost childlike way. The journal's presence still lingers in your mind. The words of the boy, his fears, his hopes, his longing for the house, not to forget him. Perhaps this light is a remnant of him, not a ghost in the frightening sense, but a gentle echo preserved by the place that loved him enough to remember everything. A soft hum rises in the room, more felt than heard. It vibrates through the floor, through the desk, through the air around you. The house is speaking again, not in words, but in sensation. You let the calmness hold you, breathing deeply as the glow pulses once more. Your eyes drift to the window. Outside, the moon has dipped behind a slow-moving cloud, and the world has dimmed, leaving the study wrapped in the glow as a soft cocoon. The glass panes reflect the room faintly, but not completely. You notice something peculiar. The reflection shows the desk, the chair, the journal, but the glowing light does not appear in the glass, only the room without it, as if the light belongs entirely to the house's internal world. Unseen by the outside night. Then, very gently, the glow glides across the room. It moves toward the writing desk, settling above the scattered papers like a small lantern placed to help someone see their work more clearly. The papers shift slightly as though touched by a quiet breath. You step closer and notice one sheet in particular has nudged itself free of the pile, sliding toward the journal, as though urging your attention. The handwriting is different, older. This script is firmer, more angular. The father's, perhaps. If the house is listening, may it keep them safe when I cannot. A long, slow exhale warms your chest. The words carrying a weight, beyond worry, something closer to devotion. A parent writing in fear, trying to trust the walls that have sheltered his family for years. The hum grows deeper, resonating through the floor. You place your hand on the old wooden desk, feeling its warmth and natural for a room untouched and unheated. The glow intensifies for a moment, swelling with emotion, before gently dimming again, as though sharing a part of the past it has guarded. You let your fingers rest on the father's letter, absorbing its quiet sadness. You can almost picture him sitting exactly where you stand, hunched over the desk during a long October night, lantern flickering beside him, the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders as he wrote to something unseen, written not to a person, not even to himself, but to the house, trusting it the way some trust prayer. As you stand in that same space, the glow rises slightly, floating toward the door, as if inviting you to follow. The soft hum continues, rhythmic, steady like footsteps, leading you gently onward. You feel no fear, only a strange tranquility, the kind that comes from walking deeper into a dream where everything is softened by night. You follow the glow into the hallway. The wallpaper moons shimmer faintly, catching bits of the golden light like fragments of a forgotten celestial map. The lantern-like glow drifts down the corridor, stopping before a door on the left, a child's room. The door creaks open without you touching it. Inside, the air is warm again. Warmer than any abandoned room should be. Toys lay scattered where small hands once left them. A small wooden rocking horse stands by the bed, its paint chipped in places but lovingly preserved by time. A knitted blanket rests on the mattress, its colors soft and faded, stitched with the care of a mother preparing her child for colder nights. The glow drifts toward the rocking horse, circling it in a slow spiral, and the rocking horse responds with a gentle sway forward, back, forward, back like a goodbye that never came. The house remembers, and it wants you to understand why it listened so closely at midnight. The rocking horse moves in that slow, tender rhythm, its wooden frame creaking softly in the warm air. Forward, back, back, forward, back. Not hurried, not eerie, only gentle, like the motion a parent would create to soothe a restless child after a long day. The golden glow hovering near it pulses faintly, synchronizing with the rocking motion as though guiding it or comforting it, or perhaps remembering how it once brought joy to small hands. You step further inside the room, breathing in the scent of old fabric and the faint sweetness of cedar that lingers in spaces kept safe for children. Your footsteps are silent on the worn rug, patterned with little stars and faded constellations that look like they were drawn from a child esimahin rather than any real night sky. The softness of the space settles around you like a blanket, and for a brief, drowsy moment, your eyelids grow heavier. This room was once a cradle of sleep, of whispered bedtime stories, and lullabies hummed against the dim lampglow. That tenderness still lives here, drifting like warm dust motes in the quiet air. The golden glow drifts toward the small bed. The knitted blanket lifts slightly at one corner, then settles again, as if acknowledging a presence beneath it that once sought warmth and comfort. You approach slowly, your breath calm and even, and rest your hand gently on the blanket. Their warmth is immediate. Someone loved this bed. Someone slept here with dreams soft enough to be held by the walls themselves. A faint whisper brushes the back of your mind, not words. Exactly, but an impression, a feeling, a child's longing, a memory waiting to be shared, and the house, ever patient, ever listening, nudges that memory forward with a soft creak of floorboards behind you. You turn. The golden glow brightens for a moment before gliding toward a small bookshelf tucked between the bed and the window. Most of the books are worn, their spines faded, titles barely legible, but one volume stands out, a deep blue cover, its gold-embossed title still shining faintly. Dot Stories for Lantern Nights. That children in small American towns once read books like this during the autumn months, dailies of wandering lights, lost travelers guided home by kind spirits, and houses that protected families from the cold breath of October. You pulled the book gently from the shelf. It opens with surprising ease, the spine unbroken, as though the child who owned it always turned the pages carefully, reverently, savoring each story. But the book falls open not to a printed tale, but to a sheet of paper tucked between the pages, a drawing. Childish, delicate, made with charcoal pencil, a house. This house. Not perfectly proportioned, but unmistakable in its shape, the leaning porch, The wide windows, the old lantern hook above the door, beneath the drawing, in the same careful handwriting as the journal. A few words. She listens at night, so I don't feel alone. The glow pulses softly, drifting closer to you, as though acknowledging the truth in those words. The child had not feared the house. He had trusted it. Lobe Italiano. And the house, this quiet, listening structure, had held that love carefully through decades, preserving it like a candle kept safe from wind. You lower the book, your breath steady, and glance toward the window. Outside, the night grows deeper, shading the world in velvety darkness. The moon has not returned from behind the cloud. The only light in the room comes from the soft, golden glow hovering beside you, brushing against your shoulder like a companion, wanting to show you more. Then the glow drifts toward the door again, pausing in the hallway, waiting for you to follow. You step out of the room, leaving the rocking horse gently swaying in its quiet farewell. The hallway feels different, now not heavier, not colder, simply more aware, as though the house understands that you have begun to piece together its memories. The wallpaper moons seem to shimmer faintly as you pass, their pale outlines glowing like lanterns, guiding you deeper through the night. The glow leads you to another door, this one, at the far end of the hall, slightly narrower than the others. A storage room, perhaps, or something once used for quiet moments of solitude. The door opens before you touch it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into dimness. The air that rises from below is warmer than the hallway, carrying a scent you immediately recognize. Old newspapers, oil from lanterns long extinguished, and something faintly floral, like dried chrysanthemums kept for remembrance. The glow floats downward, lighting the first few steps. You follow, one slow step at a time, your hand trailing along the banister, feeling grooves left by generations of fingertips. The hum returns, deeper now, vibrating through the rails, through the walls, through your breath. The house is leading you towards something central to its story, something held close for more than a century. At the bottom of the stairs, the glow hovers beside a door that stands slightly ajar. Beyond it lies a basement room. But this is not a cold or forgotten place. The warmth increases as you step inside, and the golden glow widens, revealing shelves filled with boxers, trunks, and old belongings. Family belongings, items kept not out of neglect, but preservation. And the reguens de far volu see something quietly waiting. A second lantern, old but intact, its glass still clear, its metal still warm, as if someone used it not long ago. And the house, listening at midnight, has brought you here to understand why. Asterisk. The lantern waits in the far corner of the basement, its silhouette outlined in the soft golden glow drifting gently above the floor. Dust lies undisturbed on every shelf and wooden trunk, but the lantern itself is different, cleaner, touched by warmth, as though the house has been keeping it alive in the quiet breathing of the years. You step toward it slowly, your movement steady, guided by the soft hum resonating through the walls. The glow hovers beside the lantern, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. You kneel in front of it, your fingertips brushing the metal frame. It's warm, not in the metallic way of objects retaining old heat, but warm like something with a memory, something that has held light long enough to become part of it. You lift the lantern carefully, hearing the faintest rattle inside. Not broken glass, something else. You tilt it slightly, and a folded piece of paper slips from the base, gliding into your hand like a leaf drifting from a branch. The glow brightens, encouraging you. You unfold the paper slowly. It is the ink faded but still legible under the soft light. The handwriting belongs to the mother. You recognize the gentle slant, the careful loops, the strength concealed beneath softness. If you are reading this, the house has chosen to trust you. Your breath deepens, steady and calm, as you read on. We leave tonight. The sickness has reached our street, and the children must be taken somewhere safer. The house knows. It has always known. It has held our joy, our laughter, our fears, and now it holds something more. A faint vibration moves through the floorboards, like a sigh passing from the foundation to the rafters. Our son, a gift. He hears things others do not. He feels when the house listens. He told me yesterday that this house doesn't want him to leave. He cried not from fear, but because he could feel her sadness. The glow dimmed slightly, as though absorbing the weight of the mother's words. Before we go, he placed his lantern in the basement. He said the house would keep it safe until we returned. I do not know if that return will ever be possible. But if you find this lantern, please know the house remembers our love, not our fear, not our losses, only the warmth we shared within these walls. That is what she keeps. You exhale slowly, letting the emotions settle softly in your chest. The letter continues. If the house has brought you here, be gentle with her. She has seen more than any of us. She listens at midnight because that is when hearts speak the loudest. Take care of. And if you ever hear her whisper back, do not be afraid. She is only remembering. The letter ends without signature, as though the mother trusted the house to speak her name when needed. You lower the paper into your lap, feeling a warm heaviness in the air, a mixture of longing and gratitude emanating from the house itself. The golden glow circles you once, slowly, like a soft embrace, then drifts toward the lantern. You watch as the glow sinks gently inside the lantern's glass chamber, filling it with warm light that pulses once, twice, before settling into a steady, calming glow. You lift the lantern by its handle. The warmth spreads into your hand, moving gently up your arm like a quiet reassurance. The basement brightens just a little, enough for you to notice something carved into the far wall, faint, nearly erased by time, yet still discernible under the lantern's glow. A child's handwriting. I'll come back. Promise. The lantern's light flickers softly, almost sorrowfully, and you understand. The promise was never fulfilled, but the house has kept it alive, held gently in its listening heart. waiting across decades for someone who could hear, someone who could feel, someone like you. The hum quiets, fading into the slow exhale of old beams and warm earth. The lantern's glow steadies, guiding your steps as you climb the narrow staircase. Each footfall feels lighter, as though the house is grateful, relieved to have its memories seen and understood. When you reach the hallway, the air feels warmer still, the shadows softer, embracing rather than obscuring. You pause before the child's room. The rocking horse has finally come to stillness. The knitted blanket lies at peace, untouched yet comforted. The golden light from the lantern bathes the hallway in a serene glow as you move toward the stairs, descending slowly, each step merging into the quiet rhythm of midnight at the bottom. The parlor greets you with its gentle moonlit hush, the wallpaper vines, the faded rugs, the lantern hook above the door feel different now. Not mysterious, but familiar, like rediscovering a childhood memory long forgotten. You walk to the center of the room. The house breathes with you, listens with you. And for the first time since you entered, it feels complete. You raise the lantern slightly, letting its warm glow drift across the walls. A soft creak. And sorza. Thank you, perhaps, in the language of old wood and older memories. And as the warmth settles deep in your chest, your breath slows, softens, drifts. The school at dusk always carried a different kind of stillness, but tonight that stillness felt heavier, as though the building had been waiting for someone to return. The final notes of daylight stretched across the deserted courtyard, slipping through tall classroom windows in long amber ribbons. Once the last students had wandered off toward the gates, silence settled over the grounds like a soft blanket hit. Underneath it was something watchful, something that did not quite sleep. Lan walked slowly toward the old wing, her steps measured, almost hesitant, as if the air itself was thicker there. Min followed one quiet step behind, hands in his pockets. His posture calm, but his senses alert in the subtle way he always carried himself around the unknown. "Are you sure you want to go back here at this hour?" he murmured, his voice low, respectful of the hushed corridors that seemed to be listening. Lan didn't answer right away. Instead, she let her eyes trace the familiar outlines of the hallway, the faded lockers, the worn wooden doors, the aging lights flickering just slightly overhead. "We started everything here," she finally said, her voice soft. "If something is trying to tell us its story, this is where it would begin." The air grew cooler as they entered the second hallway. It wasn't dramatic, just a gradual shift, a faint drop in temperature that made the tiny hairs on Lan's arms rise. The building was old, older than most in the district, and each door seemed to carry the memory of decades. Fingerprints, names carved into the wood, stories whispered after class by students who thought no one listened. But there were deeper memories here. Two stories never written, only felt. And tonight, those stories stirred. They passed laboratory room 3 when Lan stopped. Nothing looked out of place. The door was closed, the windows dark, but something around it felt different. Not a sound, not a sight, a feeling, as if someone were standing just behind the door, close enough to sense but not close enough to hear. Min slowed beside her. She leaned in her ear only inches from the door's surface. No breath, no whisper, but the weight of presence was unmistakable. "There's someone behind this," she whispered. "Not moving, just standing." Min's eyes scanned the hallway, gentle but sharp. "If someone really is there, we'll know soon." It was meant to be reassuring, but the corridor only grew quieter after he said it. They kept walking, and the sound of Lan's shoes echoed softly. One step, another, and then thin as a thread, a third sound joined theirs. A tap, so faint it could have been imagination. They stopped at the same time, turned the same way. Nothing, only the long corridor, the flickering lights, and there, shadows stretching on the walls like two elongated silhouettes following them. Probably just the building settling, Min offered, but the moment the words left his mouth, the sound came again, a single tap, like a knuckle rapping gently against a window pane. Len breathed in slowly. "That's not the building," as if responding to her words. "Tidder, Torom." 5 unused, since the beginning of the school year shifted. Not fully opening, just enough to create a thin sliver of darkness, a quiet invitation, or a warning, or simply the acknowledgement that something had finally noticed them. They froze. Inside that narrow gap was nothing but shadow, thick and still. But Lan felt ether, unmistakable awareness of being watched. Not threatened, not hunted. Just observed quietly, patiently. "That door was completely shut," Min whispered. "I know," Lan replied, her voice barely more than breath. "But it wants us to look." A draft slipped through the corridor from the far windows, carrying with it the damp scent of grass after sunset. The thin curtains drifted, Termob softened, slew as though stirred by a hand they could not see. And in that drifting, Lan felt a shift not in the hallway, but in herself. It was as if she were no longer merely standing in a school building after hours. She was standing at the threshold of a story long buried, a story the walls had held for so long that they were finally ready to let it breathe. A story that had waited for her, and it had chosen to begin with a silent door, cracked open in the dusk, calling her name without a single sound. The wooden box felt heavier in Lan's hands than it should have been, not in weight, but in presence, as though it carried something that had been waiting for years to be seen again. The faint patterns carved into its surface caught the thin spill of moonlight from the window, revealing delicate swirls that resembled vines or waves, impossible to tell which. Lan brushed her thumb along the edge, feeling the worn grooves where countless fingers might once have traced the same lines. Min stood close, watching both her and the room, every small sound drawing his attention, every flicker of shadow stirring a quiet alertness behind his calm eyes. "Do you want to open it now?" he asked, his voice low enough that it barely disturbed the stillness around them. Lan inhaled slowly, the faint scent of old paper and dust filling her lungs. She nodded, though something deep inside told her that opening this box would be crossing an invisible line, one they couldn't step back over. She lifted the lid carefully. It opened without resistance, as if it had been expecting her touch. Inside lay a collection of small, fragile objects. A folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age, a thin silver chain tangled among dried petals, that had long since lost their color, and a small brass key, dulled by time. As Lan picked up the parchment, the room shifted not physically, but in atmosphere, like the quiet air leaning closer, listening for what came next. She unfolded it with delicate fingers. The handwriting, though faded, was elegant and unmistakably precise, each letter crafted with care. But what caught her breath wasn't the neat scripted, was the name written at the top, Evelyn Tran. Min read it over her shoulder, his voice barely more than a breath. Lan, that's your mother's name. Lan stared at the paper, her heartbeat slowing in her chest, a deep thrum echoing beneath her ribs. Her mother had attended this school decades ago, but she had never spoken about her time in the old wing. Whenever Lan had asked, her mother would just smile a little too quickly, change the topic, and tell her stories from elsewhere. But this was her handwriting. This was her box. Min placed a gentle hand on her back. Maybe she left it behind for a reason. Lan nodded, though her thoughts churned like mist caught in a restless wind. There were only a few lines written on the parchment. Not a letter, not a diary entry, something more like a warning or a confession. If you read this, Lan whispered aloud, her voice trembling slightly, then the room has called you too. A cold flutter passed through her stomach. Min exhaled slowly. She knew this place did something to people. Lan kept reading silently, her eyes growing wider with each line. The words described strange sounds, knocking, whispering, the same tapping Lan had heard moments ago. They described shadows that moved when no one was there, an invisible presence that watched from corners, and the heavy feeling of being followed even when the halls were empty. But the last lines made her breath hitch. It doesn't want to hurt anyone. It only wants someone who will listen. Someone who won't leave it alone the way we did. Lan lowered the parchment, her hands trembling slightly. Min's expression softened. Lan, your mum wasn't running from this place. She was trying to protect you from it. Lan swallowed hard, feeling a strange ache beneath her ribs, fear mixing with something almost like longing. But why me? She whispered. Min didn't answer. Their room. A soft gust of air brushed past them, though the window was still and the curtains didn't move. Then the faint glow from earlier flickered again in the same corner. Not bright, but steady light, someone lighting a candle behind a thin veil. Lan felt the weight of the key in the box and picked it up gently. It was small, old-fashioned, meant for a desk drawer or a tiny lockbox. The moment her fingers closed around it, a pulse of warmth traveled up her arm. The glow brightened. Min stepped closer to her. It's reacting to you? He said softly. Whatever your mother left in here, it's connected to whatever's still in this room. Lan felt her throat tighten. Memories of her mother's rare, distant expressions, those moments when she seemed lost in a place Lan couldn't reach, suddenly made sense. She hadn't been avoiding the past. The past had been avoiding her. Until now, Lan whispered into the quiet. What do you want to show me? And the glow, as if understanding, pulled gently toward the darkest corner of the room, toward the old cabinet that had been shut for decades, toward the truth her mother had left behind, and toward a story that had been waiting patiently for Lan to return and finish it. Lan moved toward the old cabinet, guided by that faint and steady glow that hovered near its base, like a quiet breath of light. The cabinet itself was tall, made of dark wood that had faded unevenly over the years, its edges chipped, its handles tarnished to a dull bronze. It looked like something the school had forgotten, but the room had chosen to remember. Min stayed close behind her, his presence a calm anchor in the slowly thickening air. Every step they took seemed to deepen the silence around them, as if the school were shifting its attention onto them alone. When Lan reached the cabinet, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A small keyhole near the bottom drawer, nearly hidden by dust and age. The brass key in her hand fit perfectly in size and shape. She felt a soft tug from the air, urging her gently forward, like a whisper without sound. Min's voice brushed the quiet. "Lan, if it feels wrong, we don't have to open it." She looked at him. And though fear lingered in her chest, something stronger pushed through, a sense of belonging, of being chosen by a story her mother once walked away from. "She left this for a reason," Lan said softly. Think she wanted me to see what she couldn't face." Min nodded, trusting her, even though the shadows around the room seemed to lean closer. Lan knelt before the cabinet and inserted the key. The metal slid in smoothly, almost too smoothly for something untouched for decades. When she turned it, the lock clicked with a soft, tired sound, like a sigh released after years of holding still. As she pulled the drawer open, a cool draft whispered from within, carrying a scent that made her pause. Something faintly floral, sweet but distant, like the ghost of a perfume someone once wore every day. Inside the drawer lay a stack of old papers tied with a faded ribbon, a small wooden frame with no picture inside, and a thin notebook with her mother's initials pressed into the cover. Lan lifted the notebook first. The leather was cracked and soft, warm in a way that suggested it had been handled often before being abandoned here. When she opened it, the first page greeted her with careful handwriting, her mother's words. "If anyone finds this, then the room has not forgotten, and neither have I." Lan swallowed, steadying her breath as she turned the page. The entries were dated decades ago, each describing her mother's experiences in this very wing of the school. Strange taps during after-school study sessions, footsteps that followed her even when she walked alone, glimpses of movement in mirrors that did not belong to any living person. But her mother never wrote with fear. Instead, the words carried a strange tenderness, as if she felt connected to the presence that lingered here, as if she understood it in a way others never could. Min leaned closer, reading with her. "She wasn't scared," he whispered. Lan nodded, her voice soft. "No, she was trying to comfort it." She turned another page. The ink was darker here, the writing tense. "The room grows colder now. It's trying to show me something, but I can't understand what it wants. I hear tapping every night, someone calling, not with words, but with longing. I think it's a child. Lost, alone, unable to leave." Lan felt a chill move through her, settling deep into her bones. Min's hand brushed her shoulder gently. "A child." Lan nodded slowly. "That's what she wrote." She looked toward the empty corner where the glow hovered, as if listening to its own name being spoken after so many silent years. Suddenly, The soft light pulsed brighter just once, then dimmed again, as though acknowledging the truth. Lan set the notebook aside and reached for the stack of papers tied with ribbon. The pages were fragile, brittle at the edges. As she untied the ribbon and lifted the first sheet, she realized they were old school reports, attendance records, disciplinary notes, lists of students from decades past. Min leaned in, scanning them. Why would these be hidden here? Lan kept flipping through the pages until one name at the bottom caught her eye. It was circled in faint pencil, the mark nearly erased by time. Lucasim Tran. Her breath caught. She looked at Min, who stared back in disbelief. Tran? Said, like your family? Lan nodded. I didn't know. My mother never said anything about this. She looked closer. Next to the boy's name was a notation. Last seen, October 14th. Did not return after recess. No explanation. No closer. Nothing else written after. Just a blank space where a life had gone missing. Lan felt the faint glow shift again, as if drawing nearer, as if finally revealing the outline of a truth it had carried for far too long. Lan, Min whispered, I think the presence in this room, it might be him. The air grew warmer, almost comforting, as though a quiet voice one they could not hear had finally been recognized. Lan held the paper gently, her heart tightening with a mix of sorrow and connection so deep it felt like memory. Mom knew, she whispered. She found him. Or he found her. The glow drifted slowly toward the desk at the center of the room, resting there like a soft candle flame waiting to be followed. And Lan understood. The room had been waiting not for fear, not for escape, but for someone willing to listen. Someone of his own blood. Someone who would finish the story her mother couldn't. Come on, she whispered to Min, rising to her feet. He wants us to see the rest. And the glow, patient and gentle, began to move again. The soft glow drifted ahead of them like a lanthorn guided by an unseen hand, its movements slow and deliberate, as though it were careful not to startle them. Lan followed, holding the old attendance sheet to her chest, as if the fragile paper carried a heartbeat of its own. Min stayed close at her side, each of his steps steady, grounded, and quiet, as though he too sensed the weight of the moment and the long unspoken story breathing through the walls around them. The light led them toward the center of the abandoned classroom, settling above a desk that looked no different from the others. Same worn wood, same etched names, same faint scratch marks left behind by restless hands from years past. But Lan felt it immediately. A pull, gentle but certain, like a memory anchoring itself to a place. This was his, she whispered. She didn't know how she knew, but the certainty rose within her as clearly as if someone had spoken directly into her ear. Min touched the edge of the desk, tracing the shallow carvings left by a child's hand decades before. Lucas, he murmured, the name carrying a strange, quiet reverence. Len placed the attendance sheet on the desk, and the faint glow pulsed once, as if acknowledging the gesture. The air grew warmer around them, carrying with it a sensation that made Lan's chest tighten. Not fear, not sorrow, but something profoundly lonely, like the echo of a forgotten laugh or a memory too faint to hold on to. She lowered herself into the chair beside the desk, her voice barely more than breath. "I didn't know he existed. Mom never said anything. Not even once." Min crouched down beside her, his voice soft and grounding. Maybe it was too painful for her. Maybe she couldn't face what happened. Lan nodded slowly, letting her fingers brush the worn edge of the desk. If he disappeared here, she must have spent years wondering. The glow drifted lower, settling directly above the desktop, illuminating faint scratches that Lan hadn't noticed before. She leaned in, narrowing her eyes. They weren't random marks. They formed letters faint, irregular, carved by an unsteady hand. Help. Lan's breath hitched, a shiver rippling down her spine. Min steadied her shoulder gently. He was trying to reach someone. The glow pulsed again, brighter this time, then moved toward the back of the room, stopping near the wall beneath the boarded-up window. Lan followed slowly, her footsteps soft and deliberate. Min moved beside her, instinctively placing himself between her and the shadows that pooled along the baseboards. The glow hovered near a section of wall where the paint was slightly darker, as if something beneath had been covered up long ago. Lan stared at it, her heartbeat steady but heavy. "There's something behind this." Min ran his hand along the surface. The wall vibrated faintly beneath his touch, not physically, but in a way that echoed through the air like a distant hum. "Do you hear that?" "Eh," whispered Anne. "Lan, di." At first she thought it was her imagination, but then she focused, letting the silence settle around her. There a soft, rhythmic tapping, faint but unmistakable. The same pattern she had heard outside the room earlier. Tap, bounce, tap. Like someone knocking, gently, endlessly, hoping to be heard. Lan felt a lump rise in her throat. "It's him," she murmured. "He's still trying to get out." But the sound was not frantic. It was patient, gentle, as though he had waited so long that the urgency had faded into quiet longing. Min stepped back. "We need to open it." Lan nodded, her voice barely steady. "But how?" The glow brightened, drifting toward the teacher's desk at the front. It hovered above the drawer, as if pointing to it. Lan and Min moved quickly, opening the drawer to find a small metal tool, something between a chisel and a flat screwdriver, old and covered in dust. Lan held it gently, feeling another subtle thrum run through her fingertips, the same pulse she felt when she first touched the wooden box. Min positioned the tool against the edge of the boarded-over section of wall. But before he started, he looked at Lan. "Are you sure you want to be the one to do this?" She swallowed, feeling the weight of generations in her chest. "Yes," she whispered. "He's family, and he called me here." The room fell into an almost sacred silence as Lan pressed the tool into the wooden board. It shifted on the first try, not loose, but not as solid as it should have been after so many years. Min helped her pull it away piece by piece, revealing a thin, dark gap behind the wall. As they removed the last plank, a warm current of air drifted out, carrying with it the faint scent of something old, something forgotten, something gently grieving. And from that narrow darkness came a soft sound, neither sigh nor voice, but a presence reaching toward the first people who had touched this place in decades. The glow drifted into the hollow space and illuminated the edges just enough to reveal something inside. Lan leaned closer. Min inhaled sharply, and the story, buried for a lifetime, finally began to reveal its truth. The storm outside has softened into a distant murmur, a low and steady rhythm against the old wooden walls, as though the night itself has decided to breathe more gently. Evelyn stands in the center of the parlor, the lantern's warm glow resting in a quiet pool around her. The house no longer creaks or shifts. Instead, it watches her with the stillness of someone waiting for the right moment to speak. She closes her eyes for a breath, letting her senses settle into the quiet. The hum from Eliada, faint vibration moving through the boards returns, softer now, almost melodic. It feels like a memory forming, or perhaps one being offered to her with careful hands. The air thickens, warm and cool in alternating waves, until the room around her begins to blur at the edges. And then she hears it. A faint voice, neither male nor female, old yet gentle, not spoken aloud, but carried through the air like a sigh touched by light. Stay with us a moment more. Let us show you. The lantern flickers. Shadows begin to shift in elongated lines, stretching and weaving until the room slowly melts into another shape, dissolving and reforming like watercolor, drifting through water. Evelyn stands very still, breathing slow, grounding herself in the soft rhythm of her heartbeat. When the haze clears, she is no longer in the parlor. Not exactly. The room is the same, but younger, its wallpaper unpeeled, its furniture polished, its curtains new, and she is not alone. A family sits around the fireplace. A woman with dark hair braided neatly over her shoulder, a man with strong shoulders but tired eyes, and a little boy curled against his mother's lap with a blanket wrapped around him like a cocoon. Their faces glow with the amber warmth of the fire, but their expressions carry a heaviness, something unspoken, something endured. Evelyn watches, unseen, as the man rises and steps toward the window. Outside, the wind howls through a long-forgotten winter, rattling the frame. He rests his forehead against the glass, shoulders quivering in the dim light. The woman whispers to him, her voice soft, worn by worry. "It isn't your fault." He doesn't answer. His silence fills the room like cold air. The house remembers this grief. This is one of its wounds. Evelyn steps closer, though she knows none of them can see her. The boy lifts his head slightly, looking toward her, or rather through her, as if sensing a shift in the air, his young eyes soft, wide, search and linger for a long moment before settling back into his mother's arms. A gentle breeze circles Evelyn's ankles. The scene dims, like a lantern whose flame draws the last breath of oil, and the memory folds quietly into darkness. The house brings her another vision before she can inhale again. Now she stands at the base of the staircase. The front door is open, snow drifting in delicate spirals across the threshold. The father, thinner now, worn by years, holds the same dark charcoal coat Evelyn saw earlier. He clutches it with shaking hands as he steps into the swirling night, the wind swallowing the soft sound of his footsteps. The house's voice returns, barely a whisper. he went searching, and he never returned. The door slams shut, not from force, but from finality. Evelyn feels a soft ache in her chest, the kind that sits between sorrow and understanding. She turns toward the parlor once more, but suddenly, she is not there. The visions dissolve, evaporating into thin air. She stands alone again. The house is quiet. She can feel it watching her, not wheat fear, but wheat open, as though relieved to have finally been heard. Evelyn steps to the center of the room, her voice gentle, barely rising above the soft whisper of the storm outside. "Thank you," she murmurs, "for trusting me with your memories. I'll carry them with care." A warmth spreads through the floorboards beneath her feet, traveling upward in a slow ripple. The lantern brightens slightly, casting a softer glow across the walls. The house no longer hums. Instead, it rests, truly rests, as if a long-held breath has finally been released. Evelyn walks to the front door. As she touches the handle, a faint rustle stirs behind her. The coat on the rack sways once, lightly, offering a silent goodbye, or perhaps a thank you. She smiles. Outside, the world is calm. The midnight wind drifts gently across the yard, carrying the scent of pine and distant river mist. Evelyn steps onto the porch, closing the door with a soft, respectful click. She turns toward the gravel path leading back to town, her footsteps cushioned by the quiet embrace of night. Behind her, the house stands tall in the moonlight, its windows reflecting the soft silver glow, no longer watching with heavy sorrow, but with quiet peace. Evelyn whispers to the sleeping town, to the listeners waiting across distance and darkness. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep, and the wind carries her words home.